Hey, I'm Michael, and this is Michael in the Middle. It's an intergenerational relational podcast for people who are interested in better human interaction. I'm glad you're here. All right, another new episode of Michael in the Middle, and I'm really excited about sharing a couple of things with you. Reflections perhaps on a trip that my wife and I recently completed. We got to just have a wonderful time away that was actually kind of unscripted in terms of how, some people would make plans for a trip all the way across the country from Nashville to Seattle and ultimately to Alaska. And while we were on the trip, I really did a lot of introspection, thinking about where I am at this stage of life and what are some of the things that I hope to achieve. One of the books that I took along with me, I'll hold it up here. It's called How to Measure Your Life by Clayton M. Christensen, and he was assisted by James Allworth and Karen Dillon. And it's a book that doesn't, as the back cover says, offer easy answers. Instead, it will prompt the reader to consider the most important questions you'll ever face. Talks about how it won't tell you how to think, or what to think, I should say, but more about maybe how to process as you go along. And that was certainly happening for me. And one of the things that you are bound to know by now, if you've been tuning into Michael in the Middle over these first 43 episodes, is that I'm interested in getting out there in the middle of doing something good for someone else. So over the years, people have talked with me about, or at least some people have talked with me about enjoying my writing style and the way that several of them have put it. You say things that I feel and don't know how to put into words. And I don't really know what to make of that. I don't consider myself to be a wordsmith in the classic tradition. I've been grateful to have been influenced by several really good speakers and writers across the years. And maybe I have developed a little bit of a style. I know that I have developed a little bit, maybe a lot of a sense of what it means to try to put into words the things that I am feeling and maybe help other people give voice to the things that they're feeling. And I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've had 2 or 3 different book ideas along the way. And a week or so ago, toward the end of our trip on a cruise ship, I sat down with the little notebook that my son Chad gave me from his workplace, and it's a little journal, and I'd written down a lot of things. I did some work, even though we were taking vacation. I have notes in here about things related to work here at the university, and so it was a good and productive week. It was very restful, and I think creative as well. It's hard to be in a place of such immense beauty and interest as Alaska without feeling inspired in some ways. So here's a very rough draft of what I hope to be my first published book. And I think the working title is going to be, at this point, What's So Bad About Being Good? Telling stories of goodness that inspire and encourage. So I'm going to read you what I wrote last week, and I hope it will be a blessing to you as you think about the idea of goodness and what that can mean for all of us. So it's story time with Michael in the Middle. My wife and I have taken numerous cruises. Our first was in January of 1989. Sarah was in her first trimester of pregnancy, carrying our third son, Austin, as we have known him across the years, James Austin Johnson. Some of you may recognize that name. The cruise in 1989 was a gift from her parents, and we were traveling with several people we knew from our denomination. So we at least had some company on the trip. I remember two or three things specifically about that trip. We sailed from Miami to ports I have trouble remembering, except for Playa del Carmen, which was close to Cozumel. I bought a Hard Rock Cafe t-shirt with Cozumel on it because very few people outside of Playa del Carmen knew where Playa del Carmen was. And besides, there were some Hard Rocks on the beach, but no Hard Rock Cafe. That t-shirt was one of the only things we bought except for a few Coca-Colas. Sarah and I may never be rich, but we have certainly known what it is to have very little, especially in terms of money. In January of 1989, it would be fair to say we were broke. But for a week, we played a lot of rook and shared a lot of laughs with couples who were 10 to 20 years older than we were. One other thing I remember about that trip was our cabin/room and the name of our steward. The room was as small as our bank account, and it had bunk beds. We had grown accustomed over the course of being married a little over 7 years to sleeping beside each other. Bunk beds are fine for youth camp dorms, but not so much for married couples. Our steward's name was Anthony, a tall and good-looking young man from somewhere in India, and he was always, and I mean always, smiling. And his bright white teeth contrasted with his dark brown skin in a way that almost made me think his mouth had an electric current running through it. Obviously, Anthony made quite an impression on me. And it was many years ago that we took our first cruise, and many years before we took our next one. But we are trying now to make up for lost time. And we always try to get to know the hardworking staff on these ships. They are almost always smiling and exceedingly gracious. One of the really good things about cruising is that you can observe the communal nature of such a trip. As Sarah and I have now taken several interesting cruises, some things have shown themselves to be fully common. One sees people of all ages on a cruise, but it's more than likely that the majority of people on board will either be approaching their 60th birthday or be well past it. Many cruisers are celebrating special occasions with family and or friends, most generally anniversaries. Parenthetically, we had just celebrated our 42nd wedding anniversary on September 5th when we took this cruise about a week later. One of our favorite memories of cruising was a trip out of San Diego along what is known as the Mexican Riviera. The trip was requested by my mother, who said for her 60th anniversary of being married to my dad, that she wanted to do something special. She had also specifically requested that my brother and I and our wives would take the trip with them, which should be no reflection on how she felt about her husband. She and Daddy were quite the team for what turned out to be another year and a half before her death. The six of us had the best time. We went whale watching in Cabo San Lucas, rode an open-air double-decker bus around Mazatlan, where we saw a cliff diver, and we toured Puerto Vallarta in an independent taxi van and made it back to the ship in one piece. We shared great times around the meals on board and in port, and we went to some of the shows on board and read books and played games. But there's one thing I remember best. It was simply to see my mother smiling as she took it all in. Every now and then I see photos from that week or something else will remind me of it, and I end up smiling or shedding tears or both at the same time. It was a good week. So, as it was on a recent cruise, we saw couples in their advancing years and even a few of varying ages where one or both needed scooters or walkers or wheelchairs to get around. But they were on board and doing their best to embrace the joy available to them. In fact, two couples who were traveling together and looked to be approximately the same age as each other made us smile. One couple was on the cruise to celebrate their 60th anniversary, and their friends were on their honeymoon. The honeymooners had each lost their spouses after decades of marriage and had recently married each other. We saw a son in his 40s with his elderly father and at least 3 women in their 50s and 60s traveling with their mothers. We saw a family of 3 generations. We saw several groups of friends. And we interacted with the band and singers from the B.B. King Blues Club and the servers in the dining room. And all of this got me to thinking. Anywhere can be a good place when we take the time to see people. I mean, really, we can do the good work in this world by simply valuing people enough to see them as worthy of being alive. I know that trip in 2019 with my folks is something to be cherished because when the COVID-19 pandemic set in, we never had another chance to be together again in that way. It's a good idea to do what we can while we can. And it's good to do all the good that we can, whenever and wherever we can. I want to find ways to tell stories of goodness. I want to encourage people to think about the goodness that is in this world. Yes, there is so much evil. There is so much wrong in this world. But the God who created this world and the God who created us all said that we were made in the image of God. Sometimes we pervert that image. Sometimes we get it messed up. But I am convinced that if enough people will tell enough good stories and behave in enough good ways, that we can, like the scripture says, overcome evil with good. It is easy to get so lost in all of the lostness that is in this world that we forget what it's like to be found. And I am absolutely committed to trying to find as many ways as possible to do all the good that I can so that I can point people to the way of life that God intended for all of us. And it is good. In the creation story, we hear over and over again how God did this or that in the process of creation. And then he sat back and said, it was good. But when he created the human being, the partner, the earthly partner that God would have for fellowship in this world, he said it was very good. People are not the enemy. Evil is the enemy. However you want to put that in terms of, I grew up understanding that there was good and there was evil. There was God and there was the devil. However you want to term that. I'm telling you that there is a spirit alive in this world that would seek, as the old hymn says, seek to work us woe. There's a spirit that would steal joy, that would take life. But there's also the spirit of our Creator who would give life. And one of the best ways that God gives life to us as human beings is when we extend his love and care, the love and care of the Almighty, to people who were created to reflect the image of God just like we were. Sounds a little preachy, maybe. I don't know. But I believe in the power of goodness. And I'm going to do everything I can to encourage you to be good in the lives of another person. I'll say it again. Michael in the Middle is all about helping people tell their stories and about getting out there in the middle of doing something good for someone else. Let's tell stories of goodness, and we will overcome the evil that's in this world in doing so. That's what I got for number 44. I hope you have the best day of your life and that tomorrow is even better.